Okay, so we can move on to Austin and the board action plan. Austin, take it away.
Yeah, so as everyone knows, the board action plan was released after I believe it was April 4th board meeting that was a response to the disaster of the previous election. I'm putting forward that board should rescind all recommendations
and move to reconsider all of them at a future date. I think my earbud died. Did everyone hear what I said there?
It kind of like faded out towards the end, but what's the motion here, Kelly?
There wasn't a motion, so I would need a motion.
Austin, can you repeat the motion that you recommended, please?
Yeah, so what I'm recommending is to rescind the entirety of the published action plan and move for board to reconsider all items at a future board meeting. So that would include the executives being hired and appointed from here on out. The ideas of basically the entire governance review, and different steps that BUSU is going to take. I feel that those changes weren't, and I know some of the other execs feel the changes weren't thought about long enough. It was a rushed process. The report was only given to board, from my understanding, for a few days, and then the decisions were made. It's a very massive change to our governance review or governance structure, where students no longer have the option to choose who leads their student union. They can still vote for board members, but they cannot vote for their president or other executives. So right now the plan is to hire them, but there's no actual plan in place on how to hire them. So I would like to move to put a pause on that, take it back, and then at a different date, if a plan can be presented and different options for different plans could be presented, then for us to reconsider those actions.
Thank you, Austin. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Ben.
Thank you. So I don't feel that it makes sense to rescind the board action plan before coming up with amendments. I believe that we can have a motion to look at the board action plan and approve changes once they've been thoroughly discussed. But I just wanted to share just some information that I guess, of course, due to the sensitivity, I suppose, and Austin wouldn't have known. Just the fact that, for example, a lot of the plan came from a lot of planning from the BUSU full-time staff who spent a lot of time. And in addition to that, the student reps on our board last year spent many hours as well reviewing everything. So I can definitely say that it wasn't a rushed decision. As for the outcome, they are simply commitments to making improvements down the road. So for example, there is no change to the way executives are elected. As per the bylaw, they are elected by the student membership. It is what we started was initiating a process to develop a policy that will, and I made sure of this, go through extensive student consultation. So I made sure that it's over the summer and you know, up until it coming to the board for approval, that it receives various student consultation. Robert can attest to that, and there is no changes to the bylaw that were made, of course. Those have to be approved by referendum, and those, yeah, they were extensively planned by the BUSU staff and so forth. So, I mean, as it stands, I know that it wasn't Austin's fault that he doesn't know about that, but just that clarifies a few reasons why it wouldn't make sense to rescind the plan at this point in time. But I certainly understand if we want to, at a future board meeting, you know, review some of the things. So in addition to what I explained before, many of the actions are actually with a lot of consultation made with other student unions as well, and best practices and so forth. So I just wanted to make those clarifications because I don't think it would look good if the board decides to rescind something that the board developed with our full-time staff previously and then revise it. It would make sense to brainstorm revisions and then make those amendments. So I just wanted to share those thoughts. Thank you.
Austin, you're good to go ahead and answer that.
Thanks, James. Yeah, Ben, I actually knew everything you just said. I know the process for changing bylaws is a referendum, but what I'm saying is that we need to just put a stop to the decisions at the moment, just so this current board can decide if that's still the right course of action, and rescinding it, bringing it back up, and deciding on step by step if these were the right decisions, or if these are the things that we should still do, is the goal of what I'm proposing right now. Kaylee, I think one thing I would like to actually adjust or like amend in the motion, is there a way to make it just about the governance aspect of the action plan instead? So like that would include the board and executive, the changes. So then I believe there was something on there about training for full-time staff and student staff and that sort of thing, just because that was the main issues that we had issues with.
You can make the motion read however you'd like. There were a lot of motions with that action plan. For example, like one of the motions was to remove the BUSAC seats from the board going forward, which is something that we're going to be required to do to comply with the Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. So there's a couple things that I think the board may want to consider keeping. But yeah, it's up to you how you'd want to frame the motion.
All right. So I think that I'm not sure if Yasmin or if any of the other executives who were talking about this together have other suggestions on how they would like to word the motion, but the main one I think is rescind the decision to remove or to hire executives is the main thing. Hire and or appoint executives, I think we should word it that way.
Austin, are you done speaking?
Yeah.
Okay, we can move on to Yasmin.
Thank you. I just wanted to make the point, kind of echo what Austin was saying and respond to Ben. At the end of the day, I think that the important thing to note is that this is a student union. The decision should ultimately be made by the students. One thing that I think is also great about elections is that it does create a hype around BUSU, and it gets students asking questions about the organization and creating more awareness about us as a whole. And that's something that we do find that is important, that students should know about their student union and who represents them, and giving them the choice to choose is a good way to kind of create that awareness. Having run multiple elections in previous years, I am the first to say that there are a lot of flaws in our election process, and there should be a lot of things that should be looked over and fixed. I do think that this is not the best solution. And that's why I do agree with Austin that we should kind of look at this again and try and create a different solution for the way that we elect execs and other BUSU representatives. And so, yeah, I think that we should reevaluate the process of electing executives, but this is definitely not the best way to solve the issues that we've faced in the past. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Yasmin. We can move on to Fatin.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo off of that. Based on some conversations I've had recently, I was at the USA conference the other day, and there was a president's roundtable, and some of the presidents were discussing, the ones that have hiring processes for their VPs especially, were discussing how they've been having some trouble with students wanting to participate in even like putting themselves forward or applying for these positions that are hired. And a lot of the other presidents, including myself, were talking about how our election processes actually really help with students wanting to be involved. I mean, I think we actually have a problem of students. I'm having too many students involved, which I don't really think is a problem for some. Like, I don't think a lot of people would see that as a problem. We do, only because of some drama that has come with it. But it's funny because other student unions are actually having trouble with having students even wanting to be involved or even know about their student unions, which we don't have that problem. So I don't think the solution may be hiring executives. There definitely needs to be something changed in the process of all of this, but I don't think it's that, because I think it does bring in a lot of student engagement and a lot of students wanting to be involved in our student union.
Okay, before we move on to Ben or Austin again, we'll go to Mark because he hasn't spoken yet.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the motion because from where I stand, I believe the idea of this, I also have an issue with the intention of, while I appreciate the full-time staff contributing their ideas, at the end of the day, this isn't a student-led union, it is a student government and it's students that we're representing. And the issue with this point in the plan is that by going through a motion of a process of hiring and appointment, you're forming a sort of closed door leadership where the students' voices and the entire intention and purpose behind the union is being dropped to the wayside. And we're now choosing to go through a process that is not tailored to actually hearing the students' voices, allowing them to share their views and thoughts on candidates, on why students are running, and allowing students themselves to participate in that process. It takes a process that is student-centered, student-focused, and strips that away from it. So I'm strongly opposed to that point in the plan.
Thank you, Mark. We can go back to Ben.
Thank you. Actually, just for clarification for how this would have to go forward, is that we made like for this plan, rescinding the action plan would not rescind the motion tasking Robert to develop a policy for appointing executives. So I just want to flag that if that's the concern, then the action plan is not necessarily the only piece that has been initiated in this process. And on that point, I just wanted to share that when we tasked Robert to develop this policy, he mainly delegated it to Kate, the HR expert in BUSU, and she has made tremendous progress on that already. So by making this decision to rescind, and it would actually also we would have to rescind the motion that delegated the policy development responsibility to Robert as well. That would kind of interrupt Kate's work in the sense that, and that seems to be problematic given the sense that many of the concerns raised were exactly what myself and many students representatives discussed already. And on that point, I would just like to ask, because this would help with in terms of the available material of when we were making the board action plan. So I just wanted to ask if Austin and the other executives received the presentation file that the board received from the full-time staff and the other materials, for example, from legal counsel and so forth. So did they have access to those materials? I just want to check in, because if not, then we have a problem discussing the decisions because the current board may not have even had access to those materials that we consider. So I just want to clarify that first.
May
I
I?
can
Nathan?
Like, yeah. Oh. Kaylee, I guess you can answer.
I was
and
just
then
going to say that those documents went to the board and I didn't circulate them outside the board. I don't know if Robert did, but
Okay, Austin, you can go ahead and answer.
Yeah, so Ben, you brought up an amazing point there. This board actually, like I said at the beginning of this meeting, doesn't have access to any of the in-camera minutes or motions that have passed this entire 2022 year leading up to before we began our seats or positions here. So right now we're all flying blind, and it's really difficult to actually understand and make decisions on the specific motions when we don't know what motions were passed, because the last board went in camera every single meeting and passed how many motions. The action plan, you can't actually see any of the motions that were passed because they were all made in camera. So, and even asking for what motions were passed, I haven't been able to get those asking directly unless we pass here at board to get those, which whatever. But so yeah, Ben, that's a great point. We don't actually know exactly all the information, so that's why we want to put a pause in everything, so then we can get that information and see where we can go from here. You also said that there was students on the board making these decisions. That's a good point, but there was only 5 students, actually 4 students, because Rafe was graduated by the time that this action plan was voted on. Right now we have 12 students in this call, 13 if you include Andy. I don't think she's here anymore though. And that right there is over double the amount of students that would be able to have a say or input on the decisions for each item on the action plan. So that's why I want to bring it back forward, just to make sure that there's enough students to actually make the decisions that are going to affect everyone.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just follow up quickly on that, then I would just say I believe the solution then is for us to put a pause on the motion.
Sorry,
given that there weren't materials. Yep.
Just because we need to go to people who haven't gotten a chance to speak yet, I'd like for Aisha to speak first.
Okay, I'll wait, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to start by saying I appreciate both sides of the conversation so far, and I appreciate that you are looking out for everyone who has put effort into the action plan coming into place and the current progress of the action plan. I also appreciate Austin and the other executives being able to fully look out for the other board members and ensure that everyone is fully on board, because unfortunately, I also did not have access to the board action plan before this meeting. So I do support the idea of not necessarily rescinding the whole action plan, but a certain pause, because I do feel that it is a bit vague for the amount or the significance of the changes that are being recommended in that action plan. Like you mentioned, Ben, there is a hiring process being worked on. And I do believe, like Mark mentioned, this is a student-led initiative. And I think that it would be important for Kate to not just, we would appreciate having Kate's expertise, but not just having her work on it, but have somebody, whether it's the chair or the vice chair of the board, be looped into the process, I think would be very essential. But for each of these significant changes that have been recommended by that action plan, to have a proposal of what these processes would look like before we do vote on them, to be passed as a motion and to be put in effect. So I do think it would be important to sort of put a pause on it, not necessarily maybe striking it out, but putting a pause, having the new board members be brought up to date on each part of these decisions and how they did come to light, and then being able to have that chance to table each one of them and go through them to ensure that we are making sure that we are, you know, making the best results from the action plan. Over to you, Mr. Chair.
Austin's question in the chat, is that able to be answered really quick, Kaylee?
Yes, I would. Before voting, it may be a good idea to hear, before going to like a revote on each one, whether or not you want to go forward with it, you might want to hear kind of the reasoning behind it. Because there was a lot of discussion at the board. I will note though that those motions were not in camera. They will be in prior minutes. I can look up which minutes it was. It was sometime at the end of March. But all the decisions that the board did make and voted on were not done in camera. If there is something in camera that the board is curious about, then I can go back and try to find, I will find whatever information you're looking for. But regarding the action plan, that wasn't in camera.
Thank you, Kaylee. Ben, you can go ahead now.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think that it would make like the most sense for the board to review the materials before having a vote to rescind on something. Hopefully it would clarify if we could just table this and then make sure that all the board members have access to it. But then the other point I did want to raise is about what Fatson said, because I of course think that there should always be the most amount of student engagement. I did actually hear though from students who wanted to become an executive, but they had a problem because they didn't want to run an election because of the problems with being out there publicly, receiving threats, being under attack in this kind of public environment. So that was also a barrier. So there's unfortunately no perfect way to have this process, but I think it's not the right time to debate on having the executive hiring when that decision wasn't made. We just simply initiated the process to develop a plan of what that would look like. And also the consideration that, for example, oftentimes executive positions will be acclaimed and there sometimes isn't competition, enough students engaging. So that's happened several times. So I just want to share those things as well. Thank you.
Robert, you can go ahead.
If I could, Mr. Chair, I believe Fatin had her hand up before me, if that's agreeable to you.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Go ahead, Fatin.
Thanks, Robert. So maybe to address what Ben said first, I do understand that there are some students who aren't very comfortable in the public publicly being elections and campaigning and the threats or whatever else may come with it, which usually isn't as intense as this year was, I'm sure. But I think that's kind of what comes with politics in general. I do think that's kind of the nature of politics, be it student politics or, real life politics. And it may not be for everyone, right? Like sometimes being in that spotlight or, just being out there publicly, be on social media or in person, it just may not be for everyone. And there are other ways to be involved, right? You don't have to necessarily run for any position to be involved with BUSU. There are other ways, like for example, our part-time positions, like being a coordinator and such, or even volunteering and things like that. But regardless, that could be a debate for another time. I did want to say though, in terms of what Aisha was speaking on in Austin, I do think we need to do a revote on each motion that was passed in the board action plan, since we are a new board and we are a lot more people now than there were in the last term. But I think we do need to make sure we put a pause on like any background work being done. Like, I don't know if Kate is continuously working on the plan to hire or like what goes into hiring execs, but like she probably shouldn't continue working on that for now in case the revote is that we rescind that motion. But that's just my take on everything that's been discussed.
Robert, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess my one piece to this is that when the board did pass these motions, they actually referred everything to a referendum. So a referendum could be held in October, a referendum could be held in February, a referendum could be held in March. So none of the motions that were really passed with respect to governance, speaking using Austin's term, can get enacted until voted on by the membership. So the other thing I want to sort of mention is that while staff provided some recommendations to the board, you've noticed tonight, we don't ever vote. So Kaylee does not vote and I do not vote. So that's something we do not vote. So it is always enacted by our students. And then the third piece that I would sort of say is that, in terms of the actual in-camera portion to the motions, there are some motions in camera. Most of the motions are public, so they're actually in the BUSU minutes, which are posted online. And if the board would like access to the in-camera minutes, we would need to follow the new, so it was passed in October of this past year, Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. You would simply pass a motion tonight, tomorrow, whenever it happens to be, and we would be able to review them in a future meeting, whether that's in June or whether that's in July, in an in-camera session, but it would have to be in person. So that would be something that we need to do. And that's not my decision. It's not Kaylee's decision. That's based on the new Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. And that's what the board did in the previous cycle around several things that did occur where they actually had to meet in person. So anyway, that's my 2 cents for tonight.
Thank you, Robert. We can move on to Austin.
Yeah, I was just going to say, maybe we can call the question 2 motions. The first one being the rescinding of the executives being hired / appointed, and then the second one being the board request to revote on each motion.
Just point of information, are you looking to revote tonight?
Revote at a future meeting. Revote at a future meeting after being provided the information like involving like all of the items. So like that would include the in camera items. So like that, like Robert said, would have to be in person.
So if
Yeah,
we're
there was no-
going the route of a revote, what's the harm in rescinding it? If we're going to revote anyways, we could just rescind it and then revote at a further time. Kaylee or Robert, do you have an answer to that? Or because if we're going to revote, I don't see why we wouldn't just rescind it and say that we're going to see it, look at it again, especially because it seems like at least the majority of the people that spoke don't really agree with this action plan. It's just my thought.
Do you want me to answer that or no?
Yes, please, Robert.
Okay, so I would maybe suggest that there were 15, 16 motions passed, and rescinding them without a discussion on each tonight may actually undo some things that perhaps are helpful. That would be my argument. And to say, okay, well, we're going to take 15 or 16 motions as a board, because I'm actually a director as well, and to say we're just doing away with all of them without any discussion or debate on each and every item, maybe isn't the way to go. So I don't necessarily think that, you know, this was the be all and ultimate solution. The concept of actually looking at what was done and choosing all or some and recasting a net of what that looks like, I'm not opposed to that at all. But to say, okay, everything that just happened over X number of board meetings last year and just saying, we're just going to throw it out without any discussion on the merit of each one, which I would argue we don't have time for tonight. I'm not sure that's the best. I'm not sure that's good governance. How about that?
Thank you, Robert.
One more quick point, if I may.
Go for it,
Mr. Chair. I do think a motion to support the access to the in-camera minutes may be a good step moving this forward, however.
Aisha is also suggesting to possibly just table this discussion with, which I don't think would be a horrible decision either.
Point of order, I did call the question.
Okay, yeah, so I guess we'll vote on
And
Austin's.
And just to clarify what Robert was saying, I was only saying rescind the executives being hired, not any of the other items. So it would be it resolved that the board rescinds the decision to move forward with the referendum on hiring or appointing executives or something along those lines. And then the next step would have been to have move forward with a revote. Like those are the two different motions.
Okay, so what I'm hearing here is be it resolved that the board rescinds the decision to hire or appoint executives, and be it further resolved that I lost my train of thought. Be it further resolved that we revote on all the motions passed in the BUSU action plan. Does anybody have any thoughts on those two motions? There's a lot of hands that are up that I think were from before. people want to put their hand down and then put it back up, that might be helpful. Okay, so Kaylee.
I don't know how to put my hand down now that I'm sharing my
Okay.
screen. I can't figure it out.
Okay, well,
I did want to make
oh.
just like one quick point, was that this doesn't need to be action doesn't need to be, this is good, but there's no rush into this because nothing's going to go forward without a referendum. So whether it's, next meeting or the meeting after, or even August, if we want to make a plan by then, the original plan was that any change, I would like to go to referendum in October, only so that it gets reflected in how we operate come election time. So if there are changes to BUSAC, we can change that to what BUSAC will look like next year. But yeah, I just want to say, like, again, I know it was mentioned, but nothing's going to happen without a referendum. So whether there's decisions tonight or next meeting or whatnot, we may want to just, put this on the June or July meeting and dedicate 2 hours to talking about it, and then we know not to add a ton else to the meeting, because it'll take a while to go through. So yeah, I don't know how to lower my hand, I'm sorry.
Okay, Ben, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just go with Robert said, in that there has not been adequate information about what was
Hold on,
discussed by the
hold on,
board.
Ben. We just have a point of order in the discussion in the chat. From what I thought is that we reconstructed the motion, and then I asked for comments on the motion.
I didn't know. I called the question 2 different motions, and that originally my first thing I said was to call the question, be resolved, blah blah blah, and then be resolved, blah blah blah.
Okay,
so just so we can get going.
Yeah,
and
yeah, that's fair, because it is, just for time's sake, it is already past 9 o'clock. So I guess Austin is the, sorry about that, Ben. Austin is the mover, and do we have a seconder?
And
Mark.
When it's a call to question, so we'll vote now on if we want to go directly to voting on this question. So Austin's moving it, Mark seconding it. If it passes, we go straight to the vote without any discussion on this motion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So if anybody against voting?
Sorry to jump in. Which motion is it exactly that we're going to vote on right now?
Right now, we're voting on if we're going to vote on it.
Oh, okay. If we're going to vote
so,
on rescinding the decision to hire executives?
Yes. Yes. Okay, so if we have anybody against, please raise their hand.
Sorry, can I quickly ask a question before we do the vote?
Is it about the vote? Or
Yes.
is it about the motion? Okay, yes.
I guess it's both. So are we voting to rescind?
Okay, so right now,
are we re-voting? When we vote, are we voting that we're going to discuss and then revote, or are we just voting that we're going to rescind and then revote?
So the first vote is you're okay with moving it to a vote on the actual motion, right, Kaylee? Yeah. So right now, if you say I'm for it, you're for ending the discussion. And if you say you're against, you want to continue the discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so all those in favor of voting on the motion, please raise your hand. Okay, and that looks like a majority.
Yep, that will pass. I don't usually record the call the question marks.
Okay.
So we go straight into the motion now, so you can just read it.
Yeah.
Remove your seconder.
So be it resolved that board rescinds the board action plan decision to hire and or appoint executives as of 2023, 2024, And be it further resolved that board will revote on all the motions regarding the board action plan. All those opposed, please raise your hand.
Actually, I don't have a mover and a seconder.
Oh yeah, my bad. Do we have a mover and a seconder?
Oh, sorry.
We
Your call,
okay.
James.
Wait, what happened? What happened there? So yeah, we need a Austin moved it, right? And we need a seconder. Oh yeah, Mark is offering to second it here. It's getting late, okay. All right, so all those opposed, please raise your hand. And all those abstaining.
Sorry, Chair, I would like to put my hand up against the motion. Sorry, I missed that.
And then everyone else is in favor. 10.
All right, so we can move on to Austin again with the USA fee transfer. Woo! Okay, take it away, Austin.
I'm so
Sorry,
sorry,
just
everyone.
point of
but-
information. I was voting against the motion, not abstaining.
Oh, so, yeah, that's my bad. Sorry.
Okay, I'm so sorry, everyone. But I do want to say that it is 4 a.m. for me, so it's worse for me, not you. So basically, this motion is just talk about USA. USA, Brock University Student Union is a member of USA. We pay for our membership through a levy that every single student pays for. Every year, we give a portion of we give that money to USA to pay for our membership. For the last few years, we haven't given the exact amount of money that should have been given, just based off of how or could have been given, I guess, because we have collected our funds differently than how some other schools collect their funds. So right now there's $8,080.90 surplus in this fund that we're just asking to give to USA. This is what students were already paying for. It's supposed to be with USA. So can we just give it to them? That's the motion.
You just want to move right to it, eh? No discussion. Anybody got anything? Please just. Okay, so I was going to read that. What did it say?
Sorry, I can read it. I was just going to bring it to the agenda. Be it resolved, board approves transferring the USA levy surplus of $8,080.90 to USA.
Ben, is your hand up from before, or do you actually have a question for this?
Yeah, so I have a question about the motion and just about the levy. So it was just wondering how there was a surplus. And I was just under the impression that the levy goes directly to USA anyways. So I'm just wondering how there was a surplus.
Austin, you can go ahead and answer that.
Kaylee, can I pass that off to you, actually?
Kaylee, you can go ahead. Robert, you can go ahead and answer.
Through you, Mr. Chair. We actually do not have an MOU for this particular fee. So this fee at the time, BUSAC made a decision on. So BUSAC could pass fees. It's the only fee we have like this. And what we've done with USA is we've estimated how many students we have because we pay on a per student basis. Some years we're in surplus, some years we're in deficit. So if we look at 2 years ago, so we were actually in a small deficit. We looked at this year, we're in a surplus. The surplus and the deficit have been considered, and we're holding $8,000 approximately of USA money. But in looking at just, okay, we're just going to hand it over to USA. We don't have an MOU. So we're going to you, the board, in the absence of an MOU, and saying, can we give the money that the students voted on, or that the BUSAC voted on way back in the day, to give to USA? And there's a small surplus, which was only collected for the purposes of giving it to USA, but in the absence of an MOU, we're asking you, the board.
Does that answer your question, Ben? Is that good?
Yeah, no, I support the money going to USA. Thank you.
Okay, so be it for, no, not be it further. Be it resolved that the board approves transferring the USA levy surplus of $8,080.90 to USA. Do I have a mover? Carly and Yasmin. There we go. Oh, Carly has a question. Go ahead, Carly.
Sorry, yeah, I just wanted to clarify, is this just, it's $8,000 of surplus from the levy, or is it money we owe USA, like we have not paid the correct amount? I don't know if I worded that correctly yet.
Robert, go ahead and answer that. I saw your non-virtual hand.
Yeah. Do you, Austin, would you want to start, or you want me to go?
You can go.
We estimate the number of fees we're going to collect, and through you, Mr. Chair, Carly, this is our misestimation on 2 years combined together, but the intent of BUSAC at the time was that all fees collected would go to USA. So it is only USA fees. It's not Division 1 budget or any other budget. It is the Division 5 budget, which is the USA restricted fee.
Okay, is that good for you, Carly?
Yes, yeah, that answers my question. I do have a follow-up question, but Aisha can go first.
Go ahead, Aisha.
Carly, you can go ahead just so it flows.
Okay, perfect, thanks. I just wanted to ask then, do we know what the money would be spent towards, or just, I guess, similarly to whatever membership fees are spent towards?
I can give you access to budgets if you'd like, Carly, but the BUSA overall is open with how they spend their money. Their financials are public. When actually, Carly, I think you were a NUSA delegate. When we were at our General Assembly, the auditor came in and presented, and we had to vote to approve the audit there. I don't know if you remember that, but so that $8,000 would just end up going into their general budget, and they would then look into just how they want to allocate that.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I just wanted to double check if it was like anything specific. Thanks.
Aisha, you're free to go ahead if you'd like.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a two-part question, very short question. Robert, you mentioned that the fee is usually determined by an estimation of the number of students. Is there a way to charge the fee after students are registered for the school year so that it prevents that occurrence of having a deficit and a surplus? And then just for my future knowledge and reference, what happens when there is a deficit? How is it covered?
Austin, if you're agreeable, maybe you can start with the answer, and then I can fill in wherever appropriate.
Honestly, Robert, go for it.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair. With respect to our estimate, we actually asked the registrar's office for the number of students we have. They give us their best estimate, and then we give this to USA. USA ultimately wants their money sooner than later because they have to manage their cash flow. So what happens is we guess and we provide them 2 installments a year of payment, and then we're either up or we're down. And so I would typically prefer to be owing them some money. That would be my preference usually. So we'll be conservative in our estimate. Now, how the next question to that, and I believe you asked, was, what happens when we're in deficit? So if we're, for example, we were $350 in deficit, what we do is we carry that on our books. It's reflected in our audited financial statements. We have enough cash flow. Certainly, we have way more cash flow than USA, and we manage that within our budget, but it's never lost. So if we're up, we're down, or we're at zero, always reflected in our statements.
Carly, go ahead.
Yeah, so I know with like things like club funding, in years where we spend more than we were expecting, there's like a reserve that it goes into, which is the extra. I guess it's from previous years where there was less spent than they were anticipating. Is there a reason why we didn't choose to do that, or why like it wasn't chose to do that with at least a portion?
Go ahead, Robert.
The press release, because it literally was a press release of BUSAC back in 1995, indicated that we would collect fees and we would give them to USA. So there's nothing else prescribed in that memorandum of that press release from 1995 to actually hold a surplus. It is we collect, we giveth over to USA. With respect to clubs, there's all kinds of things the monies can be used for. With respect to the engagement levy, can be used for all different things. The green levy can be used for all different things, and we would hold the surplus. The thinking, I believe, behind this is actually money we're collecting specifically for USA, and we probably should turn it over.
All right. Well, there's no more hands up, and I mean, for time's sake, we can move on to the vote since we have. We already have a mover and a seconder, so I don't even know why we had more questions after the mover and the seconder. All those against, please raise your hand. All those abstaining, please raise your hand. All right, unanimous.
Okay, so last just quick parts, roundtable. So just if there's anything that anyone on the board needs to share with anyone else, now it's kind of an open chance to do that. For me, if you guys could just send me your like website blurbs, that would be great. I can get the website done and looking nice. Yeah.
Anybody have anything? Okay, well, the next point is the next meeting, and the next meeting is June 28th, 6 to 9 p.m. Do we have someone to move adjournment? As usual, Austin.
That's a record speed.
All right, guys, so glasses or contacts for my date?
Glasses, come on now, Mr. Chair.
Oh, Yasmin